What if there was just one key thing holding you back from truly becoming good? And no, I'm not talking about time, effort, money, or even passion. I'm talking about vocabulary. Because changing your relationship with vocabulary is a key that will stop you from plateauing and let you learn faster than most other learners, all while having more fun and putting in less time and effort. And in the next 10 minutes, I'll give you the knowledge that let me enjoy almost all Korean content at a really high level because I want that for you. We all know vocabulary is important, and it impacts basically every skill. Listening, reading, communicating well, speaking fluently, etc. Essentially, the more words you know, the better you typically are and the more you can do. But it's also really important because we need a lot of it, way more than you think. And building all that up takes a lot of time and consistency. Now, how much we actually need really depends on a few things, but for most people, if we want to adequately comprehend or understand the language, we need 95% comprehension. This is about 4,000 word families for text and 2,000 to 3,000 for speech in English. And for optimal learning and a way better experience, we want 98% comprehension or 8,000 to 9,000 word families for text and 6,000 to 7,000 for speech. That's a lot of freaking word families. And each word family has a bunch of words in it. Like develop, development, underdevelop, developer, etc. is just one word family. This is because word families are composed of a head word, its inflected form, and all closely derived forms. I won't go too far with definitions, but all that really matters is that words in the way you might think about a dictionary are like lemmas or head words. A lemma is a dictionary form of a lexeme, which are just uninflected words. Like walks, walked, walking, and walks are one lexeme represented in the dictionary by the lemma walk. And because no one is learning entire word families just by learning one lemma, that means for each word family, we end up learning multiple words, and very quickly now you're learning tens of thousands of words to get fluent. But the great thing is, learning vocabulary and language use go hand in hand. Learning vocabulary improves your language use, which further grows your vocabulary. So it's not actually that scary to learn all those words. Now, if you've ever done some input, you might have actually understood below 95% comprehension at one point, and that obviously does happen. Understanding is a spectrum, and some people can understand quite a bit of normal speech at 80 to 90% comprehension, and you could probably understand at an even lower percentage or without knowing any words if you're watching content designed for that, like some learner content. But learning in these situations can be a bit different than learning at 95% comprehension, so I'll discuss both later. So how do we even learn all these words? The great thing is that there are so many ways to do it, more than this video covers, that should work with whatever method you want, so you should be able to find a way to learn vocabulary that you enjoy. The easiest thing you can implement literally right now is a growth mindset for your vocabulary. With this type of mindset, you're more likely to do some level of self-regulated vocabulary learning, which is going to naturally grow your vocabulary. Personally, this mindset single-handedly fueled me changing my habits and learning so that I could actually double my vocabulary in a year. Aside from that, we can break down vocabulary learning into just 3 things to consider: relevance, rate, and repetition. We want words to be relevant to us, whether that's because they serve as a purpose or from input we like. We want to see these words a lot to get repetition. Typically, to acquire a word incidentally, we need about 12 to 20 exposures, but this depends on your level, the type and difficulty of the word, and naturally not all learning is incidental. And lastly, rate is when that repetition is happening, and this is really important for retention and learning. Spaced learning, which is essentially rate, typically shows higher retention than non-spaced learning. For instance, if we're seeing the word 10 times in the span of 30 minutes and then again 2 weeks later, you likely won't learn it. But if you're consistently seeing it, you should be fine. Remember the 95% comprehension stat from before? Well, for most people, if you have at least 95% comprehension in whatever enjoyable input you're consuming, you can just acquire vocabulary by consuming a lot of it. Like, that's basically it. No need for a dictionary or flashcards or study. And as you may expect, this snowballs. So as you acquire vocabulary from this content, you're gonna unlock more content that you can adequately understand and can incidentally acquire vocabulary from. Now, enjoyment is incredibly important, and finding enjoyable content as a beginner or lower intermediate that you can understand enough of to acquire vocabulary at a decent pace is really challenging. It is much easier to consume harder but enjoyable stuff and just use a dictionary or do some study or encode or make flashcards or whatever. Before that though, if you do realize you aren't learning anything incidentally and you're spending a good amount of time getting input, then there's a good chance it's just too hard. So try something easier or add in some deliberate vocabulary study. And if you're reading native books, you can try narrow reading. If you stick to a genre or author, the amount of vocabulary you need will shrink, making acquisition and understanding easier. There are a few really simple things that you can do the next time you get input to improve that vocab growth. For one, you can subscribe to my channel and gain 35,000 words for free. And if you subscribe to my Patreon, I'll upload any language's dictionary to your brain. Anyway, in all seriousness, dictionaries are pretty easy to incorporate into input, especially if you're using a pop-up dictionary, and they help quite a bit with vocabulary learning and retention. The same goes for subtitles in your target language. They aid with comprehension and thus vocabulary learning. And if you have subtitles on, it's easy to look up words in a dictionary. Native language subtitles can also be helpful, so you can use them, but I would be careful with those as you actually want to be learning. Another really easy thing you can do is just retelling. After you watch or read something, or even have a conversation, just retell it to yourself. With studying vocabulary, one common trap I see is just writing words a bunch of times. This idea seems pretty good on paper, as you're getting lots of repetition and writing does help with retention, but you're missing out on all the other stuff. But if you like writing, there are alternatives that can be great. The main two I'll be discussing are encoding and active recall. Encoding is essentially just turning new information and experiences into long-term memory. We're always doing this with everything, whether it's learning incidentally with a book or what you ate for breakfast, but there are ways to do it consciously to get more benefits. Ideally, our encoding strategy should match the remembering situation. Like, if our goal is to understand a word, we should use a meaning-based encoding strategy, and there are ways we can make encoding better, such as doing integration, which is like doing multiple strategies at once. So what are some ways we can encode? The obvious and most well-known one is a memory palace. But we can also encode based on meaning. We can make a sentence or a story with the words, preferably using multiple new words at once so that there's integration. This also allows us to practice using the language if that's something you care about. Strategies that require some cognitive effort, like generating something we're trying to remember called the generation effect, can be great. This would include unscrambling a sentence or generating inferences while we read. We can also use imagery with any sense, including sound, smell, and feelings. We can draw or act out what we're trying to remember, which integrates imagery, movement, and meaning. Or we can say or hear it. We can question ourselves and explain what we're learning. Morphological analysis, like looking at the prefixes, suffixes, and roots to figure out a word, can help with vocabulary growth as well. Just thinking about a word, whether it's its meaning, spelling, pronunciation, morphology, whatever, can help you retain it. So essentially, there are endless ways we can encode to learn vocabulary, and you can find a way that suits your own learning preferences. Personally, I prefer drawing out scenes that involve multiple new words. The point of all this encoding is that we're making connections, and those connections are going to strengthen the neural pathways, which helps you retain it. So what about free recall? Free or active recall is essentially just an activity to retrieve vocabulary. For free recall, we're going to first start by getting a blank note to write or type on. We're then going to write down all the words we want to remember alongside their meaning and pronunciation. After, we'll put the note away and take a 10-minute break that's unrelated to language learning. When we come back, we're going to take a new note and give ourselves a few minutes to write down all the words we remember alongside their meaning and pronunciation. Once we're done, we'll check the original note and write down all the ones we've forgotten, filling it in. And then we essentially repeat this a number of times. For instance, next you could take a 30-minute break, then a couple hours, then wait until before bed, then the next morning, then the next day, etc. And thankfully, both of these allow us to get relevance based on how we're choosing the words, while free recall in particular can give us both rate and repetition depending on how much we actually do. And finally, there's flashcards, or more specifically, spaced repetition software, aka SRS, like Anki. Flashcards made with an SRS are genuinely superior, as it essentially does a rate and repetition for you. If you pass a card, the interval for when you'll next see it will grow, and if you fail it, the interval will either reset or shrink. Anki in particular is the best at this, as it can take your past learning and use it to figure out the best intervals for you. And because it's so good at spacing, you're going to retain words better and thus learn more with less time studying. But the section isn't really about using Anki, more so what it lets you do. For one, it gives you absolute freedom with making your own cards, which means that you can make cards that suit your own personal learning and that you actually enjoy. You can make cards with sentences, audio, pictures, links, translations, definitions, and any important information for vocabulary or grammar. You could do semantic mapping, add synonyms and antonyms, or mnemonics, or gender, or make clothes cards. And most of this can be done super easily and even for free with various add-ons. Even better, some of these add-ons let you get this information from input, which is called sentence mining. As you may expect, these cards are going to be super relevant to you and you'll be able to rely on your memory of this input to remember the word. If you want to try sentence mining, I'll link a bunch of options in the description with some extra information. And if you have no interest in mining, there are various add-ons that can generate Google Images, TTS or Fulbo audio, etc. And finally, don't forget to just do the enjoyable stuff that works for you and stay consistent. Just doing a little vocabulary study every day goes a long way. And be kind to yourself, because learning vocabulary takes time and there's layers to this. There are different levels to knowing a word, so you can't expect to study a word and know it in every situation or context or use it correctly. If you want to be able to say a word, then most of the time you do need to practice it, and you will always need input. If you have any interest into looking into vocabulary further, go check out Learning Vocabulary in Another Language by Paul Nation. To give credit where credit due, this man basically made me good at Korean. Anyway, thanks for watching. Goodbye.